He accused her of theft in front of everyone, pointed his diamond-ringed finger at the only black face in the room, while security dragged her out in handcuffs as phones recorded every second of her humiliation. But when the restaurant's security footage finally played, it revealed something that made the Mafia boss's blood run cold. The man standing loyally at his side for 11 years had his hand in Francesco Romano's pocket. The watch was never missing. It was stolen by the one person Frankie trusted with his life. And now the waitress he destroyed holds the only evidence that could start a war. If you want to see how a false accusation exposes a betrayal worth $3 million and pulls an innocent woman into a world where truth is more dangerous than lies, why not make sure to subscribe right now, because what the cameras captured will change everything. And drop a comment telling me, would you stay silent to survive or speak up and risk everything? It was 10:23 p.m. on a Wednesday night when Zaria Coleman's invisible life became impossible to hide from. Francesco Frankie Romano, a man whose Brioni suit cost more than Zaria made in 6 months and whose neck tattoos told stories his starched collar tried to silence, sat at table 7 with 5 men whose eyes never stopped scanning the room. He'd been there exactly 90 minutes, his Patek Philippe watch catching the amber light every time he lifted his whiskey glass. His consigliere, Vincent Calabresi, sat to his right, laughing at Frankie's jokes with the ease of a man who'd spent 11 years learning exactly when to laugh. That's when Zaria, a waitress with calculation in her tired eyes and $47 in her bank account, became the target of an accusation that would expose far more than anyone intended. Frankie's hand slapped the white tablecloth so hard the silverware jumped. His voice cut through the sophisticated murmur of Stellina Nera like breaking glass. My watch. 2 words. That's all it took for the entire restaurant to go silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork froze halfway to every mouth. Every eye in the room turned to find what Frankie Romano's fury had found. And Frankie's finger was pointing directly at Zaria. You, he said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous than shouting. You were the last one at this table. Where's my watch? Zaria's tray trembled in her hands. Wine glasses caught the light as they shook. For a moment she couldn't speak, or couldn't breathe, could only feel the weight of 40 pairs of eyes pressing against her skin like accusations she couldn't defend against. Sir, I didn't... The words died in her throat as Frankie stood, his chair scraping against marble with the sound of finality. Empty your pockets, Vincent said from his seat, his voice carrying the false sympathy of a man playing peacemaker. Let's just clear this up quickly. But there was something in Vincent's eyes as he watched her. Not sympathy, not even curiosity. Satisfaction. Like a man watching a plan unfold exactly as designed. Zaria's hands shook as she turned out her apron pockets. Pens, order pad. $63 in tips she'd been mentally allocating to her brother Marcus's textbook fund. The restaurant manager, Antonio, appeared at her elbow with security behind him. Mr. Aunt Romano, Antonio began, his voice strained with the delicate balance of protecting a patron worth protecting and an employee he couldn't afford to lose. Perhaps we should review the... Call the police, Frankie said. His eyes never left Zaria's face. A $50,000 watch doesn't just disappear, and she's the only one who was close enough. The only black one, Zaria's mind supplied with bitter clarity. The only one who looks like she doesn't belong here. The only face that makes the accusation easy. She watched phones come out, watched the recording lights appear like red targeting dots in the dim restaurant lighting. Watched her humiliation become content, become evidence, become the story that would define her before she ever got the chance to tell her own. The police arrived in 8 minutes. The handcuffs clicked onto her wrists in the dining room where everyone could see. And as security escorted her past tables full of strangers whose faces blurred with judgment and pity and fascination, Zaria caught one last glimpse of Table 7. Vincent Calabrese was watching her leave, and he was smiling. Not a grin of vindication, but something colder. The smile of someone who just executed a plan that depended on one crucial element, a distraction convincing enough that no one would look at the real thief. She didn't take it, a voice said behind them, Antonio, his hand hovering over his phone. Mr. Romano, we have cameras. We should check before— Then check them, Frankie snapped. But there was something new in his voice now. Not doubt exactly, but a hairline crack in his certainty. His eyes flickered to Vincent, just for a second, and Zaria saw it even through her shock and fear. He was wondering, and in that moment, Zaria Coleman realized with absolute clarity that the woman who'd clocked in for a double shift 14 hours ago no longer existed. That woman had believed keeping her head down would keep her safe. That woman had thought poverty was the worst thing that could happen to her. That woman had never been handcuffed in front of a room full of strangers who'd already decided her guilt based on nothing but the color of her skin and the word of a man in a $5,000 suit. As the police car pulled away from Stellina Nera's golden-lit windows, Zaria's last coherent thought was a question that would haunt her through everything that came next. What was on those cameras that Vincent Calabrese didn't want anyone to see? The answer, she would soon discover, was worth $3 million in embezzled money, 11 years of calculated betrayal, and the destruction of the only brotherhood Francesco Romano had ever believed in. And in Frankie's world, betrayal and theft were the same crime. They both carried the same sentence: death. Before we dive into what happened next, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Justice or revenge? Let's see where you stand. Now, back to the story. The fluorescent lights at the precinct turned everything the color of old bruises. Zaria stood against the height chart while a camera flashed, capturing her exhaustion and humiliation in digital permanence. The officer processing her had kind eyes but bureaucratic hands that moved through the motions with practiced efficiency. Fingerprints, personal effects, the metallic click of her grandmother's bracelet dropping into a manila envelope sounded like a door closing on her old life. Coleman, Zaria, charged with grand larceny. The words echoed in the processing room, clinical and devastating. $50,000. The number kept repeating in her head like a prayer she couldn't stop saying. She made $32,000 a year before taxes. The watch cost more than she'd earn in 2 years of double shifts and swallowed pride. Her phone, finally returned after intake, vibrated 17 times in 30 seconds. Marcus, her baby brother, 20 years old, and supposed to be studying for midterms, not getting calls about his sister being arrested. She answered on the 18th buzz. Zaria, what the hell is happening? Someone just sent me. His voice cracked. Marcus never cried. Not when their mother died. Not when they had to sell the house. But she could hear it now. The wet edge of panic and disbelief. It's everywhere. You're everywhere. Her hands went numb. What do you mean everywhere? Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Someone filmed the whole thing. There's videos of you in handcuffs with— He stopped, started again. The comments, Z. They're saying things, terrible things. She closed her eyes against the precinct's harsh lighting and saw it all anyway. The phones that had come out at Stellina Nera, the recording lights, the invisible audience she'd forgotten about in the moment of her humiliation. Of course they'd posted it. Of course a black woman in handcuffs being accused by a white man in an expensive suit was content worth sharing. What are they saying? She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Marcus hesitated too long. That you fit the profile, that they're not surprised, that people like you Always. His voice broke completely. I reported 12 accounts already, but they keep coming. Someone made you into a meme, Z. They're using your face to— Stop. She couldn't hear more, couldn't process that her worst moment was being dissected by strangers who'd already decided her guilt based on a 60-second clip and centuries of assumptions. Just stop. I didn't take anything, Marcus. I swear to God, I didn't. I know. His voice steadied with fierce certainty. I know you didn't. But they don't know you. They just see what they want to see. Through the precinct window, Zaria watched the city continue without her. Somewhere out there, Vincent Calabrese was probably sleeping soundly in expensive sheets. His theft perfect and complete. And somewhere else, her face was being shared and judged and convicted by an audience that would never know her name, only her narrative. Guilty until proven innocent, suspicious by default, criminal because someone with power said so. The video had 300,000 views by midnight. By morning, it would have 5 million. Marcus Webb looked like he'd slept in his suit, which he probably had. The public defender's office in Lower Manhattan operated on caffeine and impossible caseloads, and Webb carried both in equal measure. He sat across from Zaria in the cramped interview room with a file folder that felt too thin for a case that could end her life. His tie loosened, and his eyes sharp with the kind of exhaustion that made men see clearly. "The security footage," he said without preamble. "No, that's our case. That's the only case we have." Zaria's hands were still shaking from posting bail, money Marcus had scraped together from student loans he couldn't afford, and friends who'd believed her when the internet didn't. Antonio has cameras everywhere, every table, every angle. He's obsessive about it. Then he'll have no problem turning them over. Webb's pen tapped against his notepad with the rhythm of a man who'd heard every excuse before. "I'm filing the motion this afternoon. Discovery request for all security footage from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., Wednesday night." But Antonio Russo didn't have no problem. Antonio had lawyers, the expensive kind who wore cufflinks that cost more than Webb made in a month, and smiled with teeth that had never known compromise. The response came back in 48 hours, printed on letterhead so heavy it felt like a weapon. Webb read it aloud in his office, while Zaria tried to keep breathing. "Our client cannot comply with this request, as it would constitute a severe violation of patron privacy. Stellina Nera caters to an exclusive clientele who expect and deserve complete discretion. Releasing security footage would expose our patrons to unwanted attention and potential security risks." "Security risks," Zaria repeated, the words tasting like ash. "I'm facing 10 years and they're worried about security risks?" Webb's jaw tightened. "They're worried about Francesco Romano's security risks. Your former employer isn't protecting you, Miss Coleman. He's protecting the man who accused you." He leaned back in his chair, the springs groaning. Antonio knows exactly who sits at his tables. He knows what they do. And he knows that men like Romano don't appreciate having their business captured on camera and filed with the court. "So what do? We fight." Webb's pen stopped tapping. "I'm filing a motion to compel. We'll argue that your constitutional right to defend yourself supersedes Antonio's desire to protect his clientele's privacy. We'll point out that he had no problem calling the police to arrest you, so he can't claim privacy concerns now." He met her eyes across the desk. "But I need you to understand something. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Antonio's lawyers will drag this out. They'll file extensions, objections, every procedural delay they can think of. And while they're doing that, you're still the thief on everyone's phone." Through Webb's window, Zaria could see the city that had already convicted her. 5 million views had become 8 million. The comments had evolved from racist assumptions to amateur detective work, people finding her brother's college, her mother's obituary, her entire life dissected for entertainment. "How long?" she asked. To get the footage? If we're lucky and the judge is sympathetic, 2 weeks. If Antonio fights hard, could be a month. Webb closed the folder. But here's what worries me. Why is a restaurant owner willing to risk contempt charges to protect security footage? What's on those cameras that's worth more to him than compliance? Zaria thought of Vincent's smile as she'd been led away in handcuffs. Thought of the way Frankie's eyes had flickered with doubt in that final moment. The truth, she said quietly. Nah, what's on those cameras is the truth, and apparently that's the most dangerous thing in the world. Frankie Romano didn't get where he was by ignoring patterns. Numbers told stories that words tried to hide, and the numbers in front of him on Thursday morning were telling him something was wrong. His accountant, a nervous man named Sal, who'd worked for the Romano family for 30 years, sat across the desk with sweat beading at his temples despite the air conditioning. It's probably nothing, Mr. Romano. Just discrepancies. Small ones. How small? Frankie's voice was quiet, which anyone who knew him understood was more dangerous than shouting. 40, maybe 50,000 over the last 6 months. Could be accounting errors, transfer delays, the usual 50,000. Frankie leaned back in his leather chair, and his neck tattoos visible above his open collar, the same amount as the watch. The coincidence sat in his chest like indigestion. Show me where. Sal's hands shook as he spread the ledgers across the mahogany desk, columns of numbers that represented shipments, payments, collections. The legitimate business and the business that stayed in the shadows. Here. And here. Small withdrawals, different accounts, nothing that would trigger alerts individually. But together, they formed a pattern. And patterns meant intent. Vincent knocked once and entered without waiting for permission, because that's what 11 years of brotherhood earned you. Leo's here, says he needs to talk to you. Frankie's nephew appeared behind Vincent, 24 and still learning the family business with the eager clumsiness of youth. Leo glanced at Vincent, and then back to Frankie with the kind of hesitation that meant he had something to say he shouldn't say in front of witnesses. Vincent, give us a minute. Frankie's eyes never left the ledgers. For the first time in 11 years, Vincent hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Barely noticeable. But Frankie noticed everything. Sure, boss. I'll be outside. When the door clicked shut, Leo moved closer, his voice dropping. Uncle Frankie, I don't want to start trouble, but Vincent's been acting weird. Weird how? Making calls he doesn't want anyone to hear. Leaving the club early. Last week I saw him at the marina at 2 in the morning, just sitting in his car, staring at his phone. Leo shifted his weight. And he asked me about the Cayman accounts, wanted to know who had access, who checked the balances, how often you reviewed them. The Cayman accounts, where they kept the money that needed distance from American oversight, where $50,000 could disappear into the offshore banking system and never leave a trace. Frankie's jaw tightened. When did he ask you this? Tuesday, day before the thing at Stellina Nera. Leo's eyes widened as he made the connection. You don't think, I don't think anything yet. But that was a lie. Frankie was thinking plenty. He was thinking about Vincent's face when the waitress had been accused. The lack of surprise, the subtle satisfaction. He was thinking about how quickly Vincent had suggested she empty her pockets, how smoothly he'd played peacemaker while ensuring she got arrested. He was thinking about 11 years of trust, and whether any of it had been real. Boss? Leo's voice pulled him back. What do you want me to do? Frankie looked at the ledgers again. 50,000 in discrepancies. 50,000 for a watch. Numbers that told stories when you knew how to listen. Nothing. You don't do anything. And you don't mention this conversation to anyone, especially not Vincent. When Leo left, Frankie sat alone in his office with the afternoon light cutting across his desk, like an accusation. Outside, Vincent was probably making another call he didn't want anyone to hear. And somewhere in Lower Manhattan, A waitress who might actually be innocent was waiting for security footage that would prove what Frankie was only now beginning to suspect, that the real thief had been standing beside him all along. Judge Maria Chen didn't waste time with pleasantries. She'd seen too many cases where the powerful hid behind privacy concerns while the powerless rotted in jail cells, and her patience for it had expired somewhere around her 10th year on the bench. "Motion to compel is granted," she said, her gavel punctuating the decision with finality. "Mr. Russo, your restaurant will provide all security footage from the evening in question within 72 hours. The defendant's constitutional right to a fair defense supersedes your patron's desire for discretion." Marcus Webb didn't smile, but Zaria saw his shoulders drop half an inch with relief. Across the courtroom, Antonio's lawyers looked like men who'd just been told to defuse a bomb they didn't know how to disarm. Antonio called Frankie before the ink dried on the court order. They met at Stellina Nera after closing, the restaurant dark except for the kitchen lights that cast long shadows across empty tables. Antonio poured 2 glasses of Barolo with hands that trembled slightly, and Frankie noticed. Antonio never trembled. "The judge ordered the footage released," Antonio said without preamble. "My lawyers tried everything. Privacy concerns, security protocols, even argued it would expose trade secrets about our camera placement." He drank half his wine in one swallow. None of it worked. Frankie leaned against the bar, his expression unreadable. "So release it." "Frankie." Antonio set down his glass with too much force. "You need to understand what's on those tapes. It's not just the watch. There's footage of you and your men conducting business, conversations, meetings, things that could be problematic if they end up in court records. I'm always careful what I say in public. It's not what you said. It's who was listening." Antonio moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Vincent, on the cameras from that night, there's footage of him in the back hallway, talking to someone. Someone who shouldn't be in my restaurant." Frankie's jaw tightened. "Who?" "Carlo Battaglia's enforcer. 40-minute conversation while you were at the table." Antonio's eyes held genuine fear now. "Frankie, I've been protecting you by fighting this court order. Once that footage goes to the district attorney's office, to the defense lawyers, to the court, everyone sees it. And Vincent's conversation with a Battaglia soldier the same night your watch went missing, that's not going to look like a coincidence." The restaurant was silent except for the hum of refrigerators in the kitchen. Frankie processed the information with the cold calculation of a man who'd survived 30 years in a business where trust was currency and betrayal was death. "Things might get complicated," Antonio continued, refilling his glass with shaking hands. "For you, for Vincent, for all of us. Maybe we can still appeal. Buy more time." "No." Frankie's voice cut through the darkness with finality. "Let them release it. Frankie, you're not hearing me. If that footage shows Vincent meeting with the Battaglias while stealing from you, while setting up that waitress, then I need to see it." Frankie straightened, his decision made. "Because if Vincent's been playing both sides, I'd rather know now than find out when a bullet finds me the way it found my father." Antonio stared at him. "You understand what this means? Once that footage is out there, you can't put it back. You can't unsee what's on it, and you can't undo what you'll have to do about it." Frankie thought about Leo's words, Vincent's strange behavior, the 50,000 in discrepancies, the waitress's face when she'd been dragged out in handcuffs, the genuine shock and confusion that he'd dismissed as good acting. He thought about 11 years of brotherhood, and whether any of it had been real, or if he'd been played by a man who smiled to his face while shaking hands with his enemies. 72 hours, Frankie said, heading for the door. "Make sure I see that footage before anyone else does." Behind him, Antonio poured another glass with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The screening room at the district attorney's office smelled like stale coffee and fluorescent lighting. Marcus Webb sat beside Zaria, his notepad ready, his expression carefully neutral. Across the table, 2 NYPD detectives and an assistant DA named Kerrigan arranged their files with the methodical precision of people who'd seen enough evidence to know when a case was about to break open. Antonio's lawyer had delivered the footage that morning with the resignation of a man handing over a live grenade. 4 hard drives, 12 camera angles, every second of that Wednesday night preserved in high definition. "We'll start with camera 3, Kerrigan said, queuing up the footage. "That's the angle covering table 7. The screen flickered to life. There was Stelina Nera in soft focus, the warm lighting and elegant patrons, the illusion of civility barely hiding the predators dining on expensive plates. Zaria watched herself move through the frame, carrying trays, refilling glasses, invisible in the way service workers always were until someone decided to see them. 10:17 p.m. She approached table 7 with the wine Frankie had ordered, set it down, stepped back, professional distance maintained. 10:19 p.m. Vincent leaned close to Frankie, said something that made him laugh. His hand moved across the table in what looked like a gesture of emphasis, animated conversation between brothers. But Webb saw it first. "There, rewind that." Kerrigan backed up the footage, played it again in slow motion. Vincent's hand moving across the table, his fingers closing around something small and metallic as he gestured. The Patek Philippe disappearing into his palm with the practiced ease of a magician's sleight of hand. 3 seconds. That's all it took to steal $50,000 and a woman's reputation. "Son of a bitch," one of the detectives breathed. Zaria's hands clenched in her lap. There it was. Crystal clear proof that she'd been telling the truth, that her life had been destroyed over a lie so smooth it had taken a court order to expose. But Kerrigan wasn't finished. Camera 8, the back hallway. Timestamp 9:34 p.m. The angle changed to a service corridor most patrons never saw. Vincent appeared in frame, checking his phone, his entire posture different without Frankie watching. Tense. Alert. Waiting. A man entered from the kitchen delivery entrance, an early 40s, expensive suit that didn't quite hide the weapon at his hip, a face Zaria didn't recognize, but the detectives clearly did. "That's Marco Salvetti," the older detective said. "Battaglia family enforcer. What the hell is Romano's consigliere doing with a Battaglia soldier?" They watched Vincent and Marco talk for 43 minutes. No audio, but their body language told the story. Marco handed Vincent an envelope. Vincent checked its contents, nodded, spoke with the intensity of someone making promises or receiving orders. Near the end, Vincent pulled something from his pocket. Even on the grainy hallway camera, the shape was unmistakable. A watch. He showed it to Marco, who examined it and smiled. Some kind of confirmation. Proof that the plan was in motion. "He was showing him the watch before he even stole it," Webb said quietly. "This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was coordinated." Kerrigan paused the footage on Vincent's face, his expression caught between satisfaction and calculation. "Ms. Coleman, I owe you an apology. This case against you is being dropped immediately." She turned to the detectives. "We need to brief organized crime. If Vincent Calabresi is working with the Battaglias while serving as Romano's consigliere, that's not just theft," the younger detective finished. "That's treason. In their world, that's a death sentence." Zaria stared at the frozen image of Vincent's face, the man who'd smiled as she was dragged away in handcuffs, the man who'd orchestrated her destruction as a smokescreen for betrayal that ran deeper than anyone had suspected. "Nah, we need to inform Romano," Kerrigan said, reaching for her phone. "He already knows," Webb replied, showing her a text that had just come through. "His lawyer is requesting a private screening. He wants to see the footage himself before we make any moves." The room went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. Francesco Romano was about to watch his most trusted friend commit the ultimate betrayal, and when men like Romano discovered that kind of truth, the law became secondary to older codes. Codes written in blood and enforced with violence. Zaria's vindication sat in her chest like ice. They came for Zaria at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, 3 days after the screening. 2 men in dark suits who knocked on her apartment door with the kind of patience that suggested they'd wait all night if necessary. Ms. Coleman. The older one had gray at his temples and eyes that had seen things Zaria didn't want to imagine. Mr. Romano requests your presence. It's not optional. Marcus Webb had warned her this might happen, that clearing her name legally didn't mean she was clear of the world she'd stumbled into. But knowing it intellectually and facing 2 enforcers in her doorway were different things entirely. I don't have to go anywhere with you, she said, her hand on the door. 911 already dialed on her phone screen. You're not under arrest, Ms. Coleman. You're a witness. Mr. Romano believes you deserve to see justice done. The younger one's voice was almost apologetic. The man who destroyed your reputation is going to answer for it. Tonight. And Mr. Romano thinks you've earned the right to be there. The drive to Stellina Nera took 20 minutes through Manhattan streets, slick with rain. Zaria sat in the back seat, her mind racing through scenarios that all ended badly. They brought her through the kitchen entrance, past prep stations that gleamed in the darkness, through corridors she'd walked 1,000 times when this had just been her job. The private dining room in the back was a space reserved for parties who valued discretion over ambiance. No windows. 1 door. Soundproofing that turned screams into whispers. Frankie stood when she entered, a gesture of respect that felt obscene given the circumstances. Ms. Coleman, thank you for coming. I didn't exactly have a choice. No, he agreed. You didn't. But neither did I when Vincent made his choices. So neither will he. Vincent sat in a chair in the center of the room, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his expensive suit rumpled, his face carrying the pallor of a man who knew exactly what was coming. 2 of Frankie's men flanked him, weapons visible, expressions carved from stone. When Vincent saw Zaria, something flickered in his eyes. Not remorse, recognition. The acknowledgement that his perfect plan had one variable he hadn't accounted for: her insistence on proving her innocence. You've seen the footage, Frankie said to Zaria. Not quite a question. You know what he did. Not just the watch, the battaglias, the money. 11 years of playing me for a fool while he set up my family's destruction. Zaria's voice came out steadier than she felt. Why am I here? Because you were the smokescreen, the distraction. He used your face, your reputation, your life as camouflage for treason. Frankie moved closer to Vincent, his rage contained but visible in the tension of his shoulders. And because in my world, witnesses matter. When justice is served, someone needs to see it. Someone needs to remember. This isn't justice, Zaria said. This is execution. In my world, they're the same thing. Frankie's eyes never left Vincent's face. He stole from me. He lied to me. He collaborated with men who killed my father. And he was willing to let an innocent woman rot in prison to cover his tracks. He turned to Zaria. You don't have to stay. But he used you as a weapon against me, and I thought you deserved to see him answer for that. Vincent spoke for the first time, his voice hoarse. Zaria, I'm sorry. For what it's worth. No, I'm sorry. It's worth nothing, she replied, surprised by the coldness in her own voice. You smiled when they put me in handcuffs. You watched me get destroyed, and you smiled. I did. Vincent's laugh was bitter. And now you get to watch me get destroyed. Guess we're even. Frankie pulled a chair across the floor, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "Sit, Ms. Coleman. This won't take long. Vincent has some things he needs to confess before we move on to sentencing." Zaria looked at the chair, at Vincent's bound hands, at the men with guns who stood like statues. She thought about Marcus Webb telling her to stay away from this world. She thought about her mother, who'd taught her that 2 wrongs didn't make a right. But she also thought about 8 million people who'd watched her get arrested and decided she was guilty because it fit their narrative. She thought about the memes, the racist comments, the job applications that would forever be haunted by a Google search of her name. She sat down. "Let's hear it then," she said to Vincent. "Tell me why you thought my life was worth less than your betrayal." Vincent stared at the floor for a long time before he spoke. When he finally did, his voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd been running too long and was almost relieved to stop. "It started 8 years ago," he said. "Not 11. The first 3 years were real, Frankie. I need you to know that. When I took a bullet for you outside that club in Queens, when I sat with you after your father died, when I stood up at your wedding, that was real." Frankie's hand rested on the gun at his waist, his knuckles white. "And then? Then the Battaglias approached me, offered me something you never could." Vincent looked up, meeting Frankie's eyes with something like defiance. "A way out. You don't understand because you were born into this. You had a choice. I never did. My father sold me to your father when I was 16 to pay off a gambling debt. 16 years old, Frankie. You got to decide if you wanted this life. I got sold into it like property." "So you sold me out for revenge?" Frankie's voice was dangerously quiet. "I sold you out for $3 million and a new identity in the Cayman Islands." Vincent's laugh was hollow. "The Battaglias wanted everything. Access to your accounts, your shipment schedules, and your protection routes, the names of cops on your payroll. They wanted to dismantle the Romano family piece by piece, and I was the knife they used to cut from the inside." Zaria felt sick listening to 8 years of calculated betrayal laid out like a business transaction. She'd been destroyed for one night. Frankie had been betrayed for nearly a decade by the man he called brother. "The money you noticed missing," Vincent continued, his words coming faster now. "That was just the final extractions. Small amounts over 6 months, so you wouldn't catch it until I was gone. The watch was supposed to be my exit strategy. Create chaos, get you focused on the wrong thing, and by the time you realized what happened, I'd be on a plane to Grand Cayman with a new passport and enough money to disappear forever. And her?" Frankie gestured to Zaria. "What was she?" Vincent's eyes found hers across the room. "Convenient. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong face. I needed someone you'd believe stole from you, someone who'd take the fall without question. A black waitress in a white restaurant, already invisible to half the people there." He stopped, shook his head. "I'm not proud of it. But yeah, I used you. Your skin made you the perfect scapegoat, and I knew Frankie wouldn't think twice about accusing you." "You're right," Frankie said, his voice cracking for the first time. "I didn't think twice. I looked at her, and I saw a thief because that's what you trained me to see. You used my prejudice as a weapon. I used everything as a weapon." Vincent's composure was crumbling now, tears cutting tracks down his face. "Your trust, your blind spots, your loyalty, even your racism. That's what 8 years of playing a double agent teaches you. Everyone has weaknesses, and I exploited every single one of yours." Frankie pulled the gun from his waist, not pointing it yet, just holding it like a question he didn't want to answer. "Did you ever actually care? About me, about this family, about anything that wasn't an angle?" "I don't know anymore." Vincent's voice broke completely. "I've been lying so long I can't remember what the truth feels like. Maybe I cared at the beginning. Maybe some part of me still does. But I also know I gave the Battaglias everything they needed to kill you. I told them where you'd be, when you'd be vulnerable, how to get past your security. The only reason you're still alive is because they wanted to bleed you dry first before they pulled the trigger. The room went silent except for Vincent's ragged breathing and the rain against windows no one could see. Frankie looked at the gun in his hand, then at Vincent, then at Zaria. 8 years. You sat at my table for 8 years, ate my food, drank my wine, laughed at my jokes, and the whole time you were planning how to destroy me. Yes, Vincent whispered. And the worst part? Sometimes I forgot I was pretending. Sometimes it felt real enough that I almost backed out. But then I'd remember that 16-year-old kid whose father sold him like livestock, and I'd remember why I had to burn it all down. Frankie raised the gun. The gun in Frankie's hand seemed to weigh more than metal should. His finger rested on the trigger guard, not quite ready, not quite willing to cross the line that couldn't be uncrossed. You don't have to do this, Vincent said, his voice steadier now that death was imminent. You could let me walk. Let the Battaglias think I'd succeeded. I disappear. You consolidate power. Everyone wins. Except her. Frankie gestured toward Zaria, without looking away from Vincent. She doesn't win. She's still the thief on everyone's phone. Still the woman who got arrested for your crime. I'll confess publicly. I'll clear her name before I leave. Your confession means nothing if you're breathing. Frankie's voice was cold now, the emotion drained out of it, replaced by the mechanical certainty of a man doing what needed to be done. For dead men don't recant. Dead men become proof of guilt. Your death clears her. Your life leaves questions. Vincent's eyes darted to the men flanking him, calculating distances and odds that didn't exist. So that's it? 8 years, and it ends with a bullet in a back room? It ends the way all betrayals end in this world. Frankie raised the gun properly now, both hands, professional stance. With blood and regret. That's when Vincent moved. His hands weren't as securely zip-tied as everyone thought. He'd been working the binding since he sat down, plastic cutting into his wrists, blood making the restraints slick. He lunged forward, his shoulder slamming into Frankie's chest, both men crashing against the table as Vincent's hand clawed for the gun. The shot went wide, deafening in the enclosed space. Frankie's men reacted instantly. The younger one grabbed Vincent from behind, wrenching him back, while the older one swept Vincent's legs. They went down hard, Vincent's head cracking against the floor with a sound that made Zaria's stomach turn. But Vincent wasn't finished. His hand found the ankle holster on the younger enforcer, fingers closing around the backup piece no one had thought to remove because dead men don't need disarming. He rolled, brought the gun up, aimed not at Frankie but at Zaria. Nobody moves, or the witness dies. Time crystallized into perfect clarity. Zaria saw the gun barrel 3 feet from her face, saw Vincent's finger on the trigger, his eyes wild with the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. Saw Frankie frozen mid-step, his weapon trained on Vincent, but unable to fire without risking her. "Let me walk out of here," Vincent said, breathing hard, blood running from a cut above his eye. "Let me walk out, or she becomes another casualty of your war." "You won't shoot her," Frankie said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Why not? I already destroyed her life. What's one more sin?" Vincent's hand was shaking, the gun wavering. "I'm dead either way. At least this way, I take something from you first." Zaria's voice surprised everyone, including herself. "Do it." Vincent's eyes snapped to hers. "What? I said do it. Pull the trigger." She stood slowly, her chair scraping back. "Because if you don't, you're just another coward hiding behind other people. You used me as a shield once already. You gonna do it again?" Zaria, don't, Frankie started, but she cut him off. He won't shoot me, she said, and taking a step toward Vincent, then another. Because I'm not part of his plan anymore. I'm not useful to him. And Vincent only destroys people when it serves a purpose. You don't know me, Vincent hissed, the gun tracking her movement. I know enough. I know you're not a killer, Vincent. You're a thief. You steal, and you run, and you hide behind other people's violence. She was 5 feet away now. So either shoot me and prove me wrong, or admit you don't have it in you. For 3 eternal seconds, Vincent's finger tightened on the trigger. Zaria saw her death in his eyes, saw him calculating if he had enough rage left to commit murder just to prove a point. Then his hand dropped. Frankie's shot took him in the chest before the gun hit the floor. The second shot, execution close, came after Vincent was already falling. Insurance. Finality. The period at the end of an 8-year sentence. Vincent collapsed backward, blood spreading across his expensive shirt, his eyes finding Frankie's one last time. 16 years old, he whispered. I was 16. Then, nothing. Zaria stood in the silence that followed gunfire, her ears ringing, her hands shaking, her mind unable to process that she'd just watched a man die 3 feet away from her. The room smelled like copper and gunpowder and the end of something that should never have begun. Frankie lowered his weapon slowly, staring at Vincent's body like he was trying to recognize someone he'd never actually known. Vincent's body was gone by morning. Professional cleaners with industrial chemicals and the kind of discretion that came from years of making problems disappear. The private room at Stellina Nera looked exactly as it had before. Pristine white tablecloths, polished silverware, ambient lighting that suggested nothing darker than overpriced wine had ever happened there. Zaria's exoneration went viral faster than her accusation had. Frankie's lawyers released a statement, crafted with surgical precision. Vincent Calabrese, trusted consigliere to the Romano family, had confessed to the theft before fleeing to avoid prosecution. Security footage confirmed his guilt. Ms. Zaria Coleman was completely innocent, a victim of a sophisticated frame job designed to cover financial crimes. The Romano family deeply regretted the harm caused to Ms. Coleman's reputation and livelihood. Then came the video. Frankie himself, filmed in what looked like his office, his suit impeccable, his neck tattoos carefully visible, speaking directly to camera with the kind of authority that made people listen. I was wrong about Zaria Coleman. I accused an innocent woman because I saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually there. My prejudice made me blind, and she paid the price for my failure. His voice carried genuine remorse that the internet couldn't help but believe. Vincent Calabrese stole from me, lied to me, and used Ms. Coleman as a weapon against both of us. She deserved better. She deserves justice. And she deserves an apology I can never fully give. The video had 12 million views in 48 hours. The comment section transformed from racist condemnation to performative outrage that Zaria had been treated so badly. So people who'd called her a thief 3 weeks ago now proclaimed they'd always believed in her innocence. The memes disappeared. The job offers started coming. Marcus called her crying. They're dropping everything. The case, the record, everything. You're clear, Z. You're actually clear. But clearance and freedom weren't the same thing. Frankie's men came for her one last time on a Tuesday evening. Their knock softer now. Their request phrased as invitation instead of summons. Mr. Romano would like to meet with you, just to talk. You have my word. You're safe. Stellina Nera was closed, dark except for a single light above table 7, the same table where it had all begun. Frankie sat alone, 2 glasses of wine already poured, his posture suggesting exhaustion that went deeper than physical. Thank you for coming, he said as Zaria approached. I know you didn't have to. No, she agreed, sitting across from him. I didn't. But I figured we both deserved an ending that wasn't about blood and bullets. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared trauma filling the space between them. Frankie pushed an envelope across the table. "Your final paycheck from before, plus a settlement my lawyers insisted on. Enough to cover your brother's tuition and then some." Zaria looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "I don't want your money." "I know. Take it anyway. It's not payment. It's acknowledgement." Frankie's fingers drummed the table, the same nervous gesture she'd seen that first night. "I destroyed your life because I made assumptions about who you were based on what you looked like. That's on me. The money doesn't fix it, but it's something. You also cleared my name. The video, that took courage. It took guilt." Frankie's laugh was bitter. "I keep thinking about that night. How quickly I believed you were guilty. How easily Vincent manipulated my prejudice. I thought I was better than that. We all think we're better than that until we're tested." Zaria finally took the envelope, felt its weight. "What happens now? With the Battaglias? With your family? War, probably. Vincent gave them too much information. They'll come eventually." Frankie met her eyes. "And you? What happens with Zaria Coleman?" "I don't know yet. The woman who walked into work 3 weeks ago doesn't exist anymore. I'm not sure who I am now." She stood, the envelope in her hand. "But I know I'm not invisible anymore. For better or worse." Frankie stood as well, a gesture of respect. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better than getting caught in my world." "Yeah," Zaria said quietly. "I did." She walked toward the exit, past empty tables that had witnessed her humiliation and her vindication. At the door, she paused and looked back at Frankie, still standing alone in the single circle of light. "The cameras showed the truth," she said. "But the truth didn't make anything right. It just showed us who we really are." "And who are we?" Frankie asked. "Survivors," Zaria replied. "In a world where survival sometimes requires becoming something we never wanted to be." She left him there in the darkness, surrounded by empty tables and the ghost of a man who'd been killed 3 feet from where Frankie now stood. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm, millions of lives intersecting and diverging without ever knowing the violence that lurked in back rooms and private screenings. Zaria Coleman walked into the night air, the envelope heavy in her bag, her brother's future secure, her own completely uncertain. She'd faced death and survived. She'd witnessed execution and didn't look away. She'd learned that justice and morality weren't always the same thing, and that sometimes the cameras caught more truth than anyone wanted to see. The video of her arrest was still online, would always be online, a permanent record of her worst moment. But so was Frankie's apology. So was the truth. And maybe, she thought, as she disappeared into the Manhattan crowds, that was enough.